Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, a new ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court and more legal challenges for former President Donald Trump. Plus, the United Nations Security Council passes a heavily negotiated resolution on humanitarian aid to Gaza after more than a week of delay.
Plus, rain chances are back mainly by Christmas Day, timing out those showers as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Olivia Calfee. At least 2 other states are considering whether to follow Colorado's historic ruling or leaving former President Donald Trump off of next year's presidential primary ballot. Maine Secretary of State has delayed a decision on the matter less than 1 month from the Iowa caucus that kicks off the primary season. CBS's Erica Brown reports from Washington.
The U.S. Supreme Court issued a one-line order denying Special Counsel Jack Smith's request to fast-track a decision on whether former President Donald Trump is immune from federal prosecution for his alleged role in trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
They didn't give us reasons, and we can think of both legal and non-legal reasons why they might not want to jump into the fray. It's not unheard of for them to say, let's let this play out in the Court of Appeals first. That's typical.
Trump, who leads the pack of Republican presidential candidates, is also fighting back against this week's controversial ruling in Colorado, where the state Supreme Court found him ineligible to appear on the state's primary ballot.
Can you believe what's going on in our country?
The 4-3 decision stems from the former president's involvement in the January 6th insurrection. Trump's campaign has vowed to appeal the ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The January 6th riot and the congressional conclusion that Trump incited the attack are also at the center of California and Maine trying to keep him off the ballot.
There is a strong legal case that Donald Trump violated the Insurrection Act, violated the 14th Amendment, and is subject to this type of scrutiny and this type of accountability.
But some Republicans argue President Biden and Democrats are using legal challenges to sway the election.
The more that the judicial system has to get involved where it's looking partisan, but it's not going to kind of put at ease any of the voters who may feel they're being disenfranchised.
As Trump's legal drama plays out, other GOP presidential candidates have also weighed in.
If Colorado isn't going to include Trump on the GOP primary ballot, then I will withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary ballot.
No judges need to decide who can and can't be on the ballot.
Republicans in Iowa will be the first to cast their votes for their choice in the state's caucuses on January 15th. Erica Brown, CBS News, Washington.
In another case, former President Trump has requested a delay in the defamation lawsuit he's facing from writer E. Jean Carroll. Trump's legal team says they need more time to consider appellate options, including a possible appeal to the Supreme Court.
Well, on this first full day of winter, we are tracking some nice conditions as we go into your Friday evening. Here's a live look across the mountains from I-64 in Rowan County, also to Buffalo Mountain in Perry County, also at the London Corbin Airport. And once again, we are dry under a mix of sun and clouds. And those temperatures are well above average for late December. Most of us in the middle to even upper 50s in some areas, up to 57 for Harlan, 55 in Jackson, also London, and 53 for Manchester. So we stay mild as we go into this evening, but as we go into tonight, a little bit cooler as the sun sets back in the upper 30s and lower 40s. Up on first alert, pinpoint Doppler as high pressure is once again the big story on this Friday evening. We are dry, but notice a widespread soaking is on tap, especially by Monday for Christmas Day, also into your Tuesday. Timing out those rain chances in just a few minutes. Olivia?
Cameron, thank you. A patient was shot early this morning at a Virginia hospital. Richmond police say a man came to the emergency department to check himself in for mental health treatment. They say when he was changing into a hospital gown, he started shooting. Another police officer who was there on an unrelated case heard the gunfire and shot at the man. A patient caught in the crossfire has critical but non-life-threatening injuries. Police arrested the shooter. Prosecutors in Idaho have proposed a summer 2024 start date in the murder trial against Brian Kohberger. In a motion filed yesterday, prosecuting attorneys said the summer would avoid times when adjacent Moscow high school and area universities are in session. Prosecutors are worried about the increased media attention and the flood of people who will be in the area during the trial and how that will impact life in Moscow. The trial is expected to last about 6 weeks. There's word today that one of the dual U.S.-Israeli citizens thought to be taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th is dead. The news comes as the UN Security Council passed a heavily negotiated resolution on humanitarian aid to Gaza after more than a week of delay. CBS's Willie James Inman reports from Washington.
The Nir Oz kibbutz has confirmed Gadi Haggai was killed by Hamas gunmen on October the 7th, and that his remains have been held in Gaza ever since. The 73-year-old and his wife Judy, both dual American-Israeli citizens, were last heard from the day of the attack. Judy is thought to still be among the captives.
Those in favor of the draft resolution.
The news comes the same day the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution on desperately needed humanitarian aid to Gaza, creating a pathway to expedite food, water, and fuel to Palestinian civilians living in the war-torn territory.
This was tough, but we got there.
The resolution also demands the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, but it does not call for a pause in the fighting or a ceasefire, earning the support of the United States, which abstained, allowing the vote to pass.
It took many days and many long nights of negotiating to get this right. But today, this council provided a glimmer of hope amongst a sea of unimaginable suffering.
The State Department tells CBS News that Secretary Antony Blinken was personally involved in negotiations on a resolution that the U.S. would not veto, making calls to counterparts around the world to move the process forward.
The vote comes a day after a report by the United Nations and other agencies found that 500,000 people in Gaza are starving. That's 1/4 of the population. Willie James Inman, CBS News, Washington.
With only minimum humanitarian aid currently going into Gaza, the UN World Food Program has said 90% of the population is regularly going without food for a full day. Governor Andy Beshear is working to combat religious hate. During his Team Kentucky briefing yesterday, he announced his Kentucky Anti-Semitism Task Force. It is part of Governor's office faith-based initiative. 18 members are part of the task force. It comes as several synagogues across the state are seeing an uptick in hate since the war in Gaza began.
The task force, we are letting Kentuckians of all faiths who may be hurting during this time say that we see you and we will keep fighting against hate.
State Representative Daniel Grossberg and House Democratic caucus leaders released a statement praising the creation of the task force, saying Governor Beshear has embraced this initiative amid an unprecedented rise in anti-Semitic incidents in Kentucky. In its final press briefing yesterday, members with the White House addressed a number of issues the country is facing, including border security. The issue has become central to the debate about a $100 billion supplemental security funding bill, with Republicans insisting changes be made on border policy when debating the bill, which also would provide funding for the wars in Ukraine and Gaza.
It's a big part of the supplemental request, and should we get the funding we're asking for, it will give us an opportunity to put more Border Patrol officers out there on the border. It will give us a chance to increase the asylum court officers and help with that process. And there's some physical security measures that are baked into that funding as well.
The White House press secretary also mentioned one more package of military aid is on the way for Ukraine this month. But then after that, it is up to Congress to authorize new aid.